Just a video response to Logic Rolls the Dice's latest video, actually quite a good video, dealing with something that fascinates me a great deal, the Benatarian asymmetry argument, which I believe has been more or less conclusively refuted. But one of the things that I'd like to sort of bring into this discussion is this idea of preconception. The idea of what you expect to see when you look out into the world, and how you almost cannot help but do this. Something of, I guess, a point of departure is Nietzsche's possibly apocryphal statement. Those who were seen dancing were thought insane by those who could not hear the music. Now, it's a very Nietzschean thing to say, but it's not entirely clear as to whether or not he said it. I haven't done a great deal of research into it, and I don't really care whether or not he said it. But, you know, it could have been said by Bart Simpson, for all I care. If you actually think about that one, that's a very interesting point of view when you get into the actual life affirmation denial thing. Can anyone explain, and does anyone ultimately have the tools to explain why they're either an affirmer or a denier? Can you actually do it? If you see a bunch of people dancing and you can't hear the music, what they're doing doesn't make sense. But if you're actually sort of, as in a fundamental sense, deaf to the music that they're hearing, neither of you can comment on the quality of the music or why they're jumping around on the dance floor. It doesn't make any sense at all. It doesn't mean that either one is wrong. It means that they live in more or less two separate universes, as it were, two separate value universes. I've come at this from 2 points of view. One of the first ones is, the first one is the bit about depression. One of the things about depression is not only do you lose your sort of savor of life, you lose your ability to enjoy anything. You know, there's an anhedonia mixed in with a sort of positive darkness, a darkness that, or a gloominess that actually has something tangible. It's not just an absence, it's an actual presence of something negative, suffering, etc. And when you try and explain that, when you're in a state of dark depression, when you're trying to explain that to somebody who isn't, you're constantly struck by the sheer futility of trying to get this point across to people. Now, this is what I'm not bringing up depression, i.e., if you subscribe to the Benatarian asymmetry, you're automatically depressed. But what I'm saying is, if you look at that, if you look at the idea of fundamental anhedonia and fundamental feeling that the universe and life and everything is malignant, even before you start to think, even before you start to examine anything, and you look at that from the point of view of someone who actually is in that position, and I've been there before, you sort of see just how hard it is to communicate with people who are not in that state of deep depression, at least in terms of how you actually experience life. They do not get it. In fact, you have to, in some way, you have to forgive them because they can't get it. You're trying, especially with somebody close to you, you're trying to explain how you feel, but it's useless. You get this constant feeling that there's just no way they will ever get it. And not only that, they kind of don't want to get it either. And again, who can blame them? Because what happens is when you get out of depression, I had to claw my way out of it the hard way. It took me about 10 years. But once you do get out of it, though, you forget what you felt like afterwards, in some sense, because you don't see any value in it. You've just spent all this time working your way out of something. Why the hell would I want to even get a whiff of what it's like back there? That's a nasty temptation, I think, that a lot of recovered depressives fall into. I kind of try to, in as much as it's possible, remind myself of what it was like to be back in that pit of depression. What it was like when you couldn't hear the music. Now, both sides of that aphorism, those who were seen dancing were thought insane by those who couldn't hear the music, are interesting because looked at from the point of view of the people who were deaf or the people who were just blocked from listening to the music, there's really nothing. It's not that what the people on the dance floor are doing is wrong or stupid or doesn't make any sense or anything. It's just based on the information at the disposal of those who cannot hear the music. What the people on the dance floor are doing doesn't make sense. By the same token, the people who are dancing, who are feeling pretty good about things, don't understand why there are people sitting there looking at them with a glum or blank look on their faces. They go, why on earth would these people not join in here? Oh, well, not my problem. And, they would, I guess, stop thinking in the same way as the people who were unable to hear the music would stop thinking. You're looking at two fundamentally different universes staring at each other and not having any means of bridging the gap, at least at present. The people who are dancing are convinced that everything is great. The people who are not dancing are convinced that anyone who thinks that things are great are insane. Never the twain shall meet? I'm not so sure about that. But what I would say is the chasm between the two is a lot greater than one might think. And the chasm may be a pre-existing chasm. I'm not implying that anyone who agrees with Benatar is depressed. Nor am I implying that anyone who can hear the music or who is more or less in a state of affirmation, if you want to call it that way, is somehow right either. It's not a question of wrong or right. It's a question of two fundamentally different preconceptions. Before you even start to look into the entire matter, you're coming at it from a perspective without realizing it. And there's not many people out there that I have met, at least, that have seen it from both sides of the microscope, I guess you'd call it, and who sort of try and maintain a view of both sides, who try to, sort of cured or recovering depressives who sort of still want to remind themselves of what it was like and still want to, in some sense, benefit. Sounds insane, but in my case, I believe it's true, benefit from the fact that they've actually had this depression. You have to sort of maintain a capacity to see both. And if you're able to do that, and this isn't something that I think you can really talk about on YouTube in a video. I think it's an experiential thing. I think it's right down at the basic level of perception and bias and fundamental value bias that is the only way you can really approach this. And I don't really see how you can argue it as a logical formula the way Benatar has. Cheapens the whole thing. We're not just a pile of logical formulae, Mr. Benatar. We're human beings, and human beings are a gazillion other things. If you look at people who are sort of ridiculously over-the-top affirmers, I always like to use the case of Ned Flanders. There's something, incomplete about his character. There's something wrong with the way he is. You don't know why, but you agree with Homer Simpson that he's a jerk. It's because he's refusing to see reality for what reality is, warts and all. But by the same token, if you get some people who will make a case for sort of life denial, you see somebody who is frustrated, who is angry about the fact that they're constantly having to put up with all this crap by the Ned Flanderses of the world. And if you ask me, they may simply be looking into a distorted mirror. They may be actually looking at a positive-negative image of each other. I don't really see how they're fundamentally that different. Each one is looking at the other and simply doesn't understand what it sees from the very beginning.